Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of history's most brutal workplaces, a medieval brothel. Picture this. You're standing outside a rickety wooden building that reeks of unwashed bodies, spoiled wine, and things you'd rather not identify. The smell hits you like a physical wall, making your modern sensibilities recoil in horror. Through grimy, oil paper windows, you glimpse shadowy figures moving in candlelit rooms where privacy is a luxury nobody can afford and hygiene is a concept that won't be invented for another few centuries. You're about to enter a world where a single day would test every survival instinct you never knew you had. The reality? You probably won't make it past sunrise without contracting something that would send a modern emergency room into full quarantine mode. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love seeing our little community span the globe as we drift off together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The heavy wooden door creaks open as you step inside, and immediately your eyes water from the thick smoke of tallow candles mixed with pipe tobacco and something that might generously be called incense but smells more like burning hair. The floor beneath your feet squelches with a mixture of spilled ale, mud tracked in from the streets, and bodily fluids you're desperately trying not to think about. Welcome to your new workplace, a medieval brothel where the life expectancy is measured in months, not years. You're not here by choice. Of course, nobody chooses this life. Maybe you're a widow whose husband's debts passed to you upon his death. Or perhaps you're a runaway servant fleeing a master's unwanted advances, only to discover that the streets offer even fewer protections. The year is 1347. The Black Death is sweeping across Europe, and survival takes precedence over dignity. Your empty stomach and the approaching winter have made this decision for you. The madam approaches a woman who might be 35 but looks 50, her face bearing the telltale marks of someone who's survived in this business longer than most. Her teeth are mostly gone, not from poor dental care alone, but from the mercury treatments used to combat the syphilis that's as common here as fleas on a dog. She looks you up and down with the practiced eye of someone evaluating livestock, calculating your potential earning capacity against your likely lifespan. Fresh meat, she says with a voice roughened by years of cheap wine and cheaper tobacco. You'll fetch good coin for the first few weeks, until the novelty wears off. She doesn't mention that those first few weeks are also when you're most likely to survive whatever diseases your clients bring with them. After that, well, your immune system will either adapt or you'll join the countless others buried in unmarked graves behind the city walls. The establishment operates under the loose authority of the local lord, who takes his cut while maintaining plausible deniability about what exactly goes on here. It's a delicate balance. Society needs this outlet for male urges that might otherwise be directed toward respectable women, but it also needs to maintain the fiction that such places barely exist. You're simultaneously essential and invisible, necessary and disposable. Your room is barely larger than a modern closet, with a straw mattress that hosts an entire ecosystem of insects and parasites. The walls are thin enough that you can hear everything happening in the adjacent spaces, the grunts of clients, the fake moans of workers, and occasionally, the genuine cries of pain when things go wrong. And things go wrong frequently. The straw beneath you rustles with movement that isn't your slice. Fleas, bedbugs, and creatures you can't identify scramble across your skin throughout the night. The building itself seems designed to maximize misery. Wooden beams sag under the weight of too many bodies and too little maintenance. Rain drips through gaps in the roof, creating puddles that never dry and breeding grounds for mosquitoes that carry their own diseases. The privy is a hole in the ground shared by dozens of people, creating a constant source of contamination that seeps into the groundwater and spreads illness throughout the establishment. The clientele ranges from desperate peasants spending their last copper coins to wealthy merchants seeking pleasures their wives won't provide. Knights stopping by during military campaigns bring not only violence and entitlement but also diseases collected from battlefields and foreign lands. Priests, despite their vows of celibacy, are regular customers who justify their visits through theological gymnastics that would impress modern lawyers. Each group brings its own dangers. Peasants might be riddled with parasites from working in filth. Merchants could carry exotic diseases from their travels. Knights often express their frustrations through violence. And clergy members demand absolute discretion while threatening eternal damnation. Water is scarce and expensive, so bathing is a rare luxury reserved for special occasions like when a customer dies from something contagious enough to scare away others. Most cleaning involves wiping down with rags that get reused until they disintegrate. The concept of germs won't be discovered for centuries. So what you can't see can't hurt you, right? Wrong. So very wrong. The same cloth used to clean one person gets passed around until it's more bacteria than fabric, spreading infections faster than gossip in a small village. Your fellow workers are a mixture of the desperate, the abandoned, and the unlucky. There's Margaret, who arrived 3 months ago as a farmer's daughter fleeing a marriage to her uncle, and who now coughs blood into her sleeve between customers. There's Eleanor, a former merchant's wife who fell into debt after her husband's business failed, and who maintains her sanity by pretending this is all temporary. And there's Sarah, who's been here the longest at the advanced age of 22, a veteran who's survived by being smarter, tougher, and luckier than most. Sarah becomes your unofficial mentor, teaching you the unwritten rules of survival. Never trust a client who won't look you in the eye. She whispers as she shows you how to hide small coins in your mattress. And always keep a knife within reach, even when you're sleeping. She points out the regular customers to avoid: the merchant who likes to strangle women during his visits, the soldier who once broke a girl's arm for refusing his advances, and the priest who demands acts so depraved they'd make a demon blush. The workday begins before dawn and ends well after midnight. Sleep comes in brief snatches between customers, and even then, you're never truly safe. Robbery, assault, and worse are constant threats, not just from clients but from other workers competing for resources, from local thugs who view the brothel as easy pickings, and from authorities who see you as fair game for whatever abuse they feel like dispensing. Food consists mainly of bread, thin gruel, and whatever scraps the kitchen can spare. Malnutrition weakens your already compromised immune system, making you more susceptible to the diseases that spread through the establishment like wildfire. Scurvy, rickets, and anemia are so common that they're considered normal parts of the job rather than medical conditions requiring treatment. The bread is often moldy, the gruel watery enough to see your reflection in, and the scraps consist of gristle and fat that even the pigs rejected. The kitchen itself is a breeding ground for illness. Meat hangs in the open air, attracting flies and beginning to rot before it's cooked. Vegetables are scarce and expensive, so most meals lack the nutrients needed to maintain health. The cook, a woman who lost her nose to syphilis years ago, uses the same knife to cut raw meat and bread without washing it between uses. Food poisoning is so common that stomach cramps and violent vomiting are considered normal parts of daily life. The legal system offers no protection. In fact, it's actively hostile. Sex workers exist in a legal gray area where they're tolerated but not protected. If a client beats you to death, the worst he might face is a fine for disturbing the peace. If you fight back and harm a customer, you could face execution for assault on your social superior. The law sees you as a commodity that's damaged its user, not as a person defending herself. Winter approaches, and with it comes the annual die-off as cold, hunger, and disease claim their victims. The lucky ones succumb quickly to something acute rather than suffering the slow decline of chronic illness. You watch your fellow workers disappear one by one, their spaces quickly filled by new arrivals who don't yet understand what they've gotten themselves into. The cold seeps through every crack in the building, and heating is limited to a single fireplace in the common room that produces more smoke than warmth. Medieval medicine, such as it exists, is based on the theory of humorist belief that illness results from imbalances in bodily fluids. Treatment involves bloodletting, purging, and the application of various poultices that are more likely to cause infection than cure it. Pain relief comes mainly from alcohol, which creates its own set of problems in a profession where awareness and quick reflexes can mean the difference between survival and death. The church preaches that your profession marks you as a sinner deserving of whatever misfortune befalls you, while simultaneously relying on your services to prevent greater social disruption. This hypocrisy extends throughout medieval society, which needs you to exist but refuses to acknowledge your humanity. You're a necessary evil, a lightning rod for male desires that might otherwise threaten the social order. Historians still argue whether medieval society's treatment of sex workers was worse than that of other marginalized groups, but the evidence suggests you're competing for the bottom of a very deep barrel. Your existence serves multiple purposes: economic, social, and psychological, yet society refuses to provide even basic protections for those who serve these functions. The building's other residents include rats the size of small cats that have grown bold enough to steal food from your hands, cockroaches that crunch underfoot with every step, and spiders whose webs stretch across corners like medieval tapestries. These creatures are often your only reliable companions, and at least they don't expect payment for their company. As your first night approaches, you realize that everything you thought you knew about hardship was just practice for this moment. The medieval brothel isn't just a workplace, it's a death trap designed to extract every possible ounce of value from human desperation before discarding the empty shell. And you're about to discover just how creative medieval society could be when it came to monetizing misery. The morning sun struggles through the grimy windows as you experience your first full dawn in this pestilence palace. And immediately you understand why medieval people believed in healthy, simply looked around a brothel and taken notes. The air itself seems alive with invisible threats, thick enough to chew and seasoned with the aromatic bouquet of human decay. Every breath you take is a gamble with pathogens that would make modern epidemiologists weep into their hazmat suits. Your skin already itches from the company of 1,000 tiny roommates who moved in without paying rent. The lice arrived first, setting up permanent residence in your hair and clothing with the enthusiasm of medieval colonists claiming new territory. These aren't the dainty head lice that panic modern parents. These are medieval super lice, battle-hardened parasites that have evolved alongside humans for millennia and view your scalp as prime real estate. They bite with the dedication of tax collectors, leaving welts that you scratch until they bleed, creating perfect entry points for the bacterial infections waiting in line behind them. The fleas hop around like tiny acrobats performing a circus of disease transmission. Medieval fleas are particularly gifted at their craft, carrying not just the bubonic plague but a variety of other delightful conditions including typhus and tularemia. They treat your body like a highway system, traveling from person to person with the efficiency of a well-organized postal service. Except instead of delivering letters, they're dropping off microscopic death sentences. The plague fleas are especially concerning. They carry Yersinia pestis, the bacterium responsible for wiping out 1/3 of Europe's population during the Black Death. Bedbugs emerge at night like vampire accountants, methodically draining your blood while you sleep. Their bites create distinctive patterns across your skin-neat rows of raised, angry welts that burn and itch for days. The medieval solution to bedbugs involves burning sulfur in closed rooms, a process that's about as likely to kill you as the bugs, but with the added benefit of making everything smell like the devil's armpit. These creatures have adapted perfectly to human habitation, hiding in mattress seams during the day and emerging after dark to feed on sleeping victims. The communal sleeping arrangements mean that diseases spread through the building faster than gossip at a church social. Respiratory infections pass from person to person with each cough, sneeze, or shared conversation. Tuberculosis, known as consumption in medieval times, turns your fellow workers into walking skeletons who cough blood and waste away before your eyes. The distinctive hollow cough echoes through the building day and night, a constant reminder of your likely future. The disease spreads through tiny droplets expelled when infected people cough or speak, turning every conversation into a potential death sentence. Scabies mites burrow under your skin like tiny miners, creating tunnels that itch with an intensity that makes you want to claw yourself raw. The medieval treatment involves rubbing mercury ointment into the affected areas, which does kill the mites but also slowly poisons you with heavy metals. It's a perfect example of medieval medical logic. Sure, the cure might kill you, but at least you won't itch while you're dying. The mites prefer warm areas of the body like the spaces between fingers and toes, creating intricate patterns of infection that spread through direct contact. The water situation defies description while simultaneously explaining why medieval people drank so much ale. The well that supplies the brothel draws from groundwater that's been contaminated by decades of human waste, animal remains, and industrial runoff from nearby tanneries and butcher shops. The water has a brownish tint and a smell that suggests it's been marinating in things that were never meant to be marinade. Drinking it is like playing Russian roulette with dysentery, cholera, and a dozen other waterborne illnesses that medieval people couldn't name but knew would kill them. Boiling water is supposed to make it safer, but fuel is expensive and the concept of germs won't be discovered for centuries. So the practice is hit or miss. More often, people just add enough ale or wine to the water to make it somewhat less likely to kill them immediately, creating a perpetual state of mild intoxication that probably helps them ignore how miserable everything is. The alcohol content in medieval ale was typically low, around 2 to 3%, just enough to kill some bacteria while keeping people functional enough to work. The privy system represents medieval sanitation at its absolute worst. Imagine a hole in the ground shared by 50 people with active digestive issues, and you're beginning to understand the scope of the problem. The waste doesn't disappear, it accumulates in underground pits that overflow during heavy rains, sending streams of contaminated sludge through the building's lower levels. The smell is indescribable, a combination of ammonia, sulfur, and decomposition that penetrates clothing, hair, and eventually seems to seep into your very soul. Toilet paper won't be invented for centuries, so medieval people make do with whatever's available: rags, leaves, or just their left hand followed by a hopefully thorough washing. The concept of hand sanitizer is about as foreign as space travel, so diseases spread through touch with the efficiency of a well-organized conspiracy. The wealthy might use wool or linen scraps, while the poor resort to moss, corn cobs, or simply smooth stones. The lack of proper cleaning materials means that fecal contamination spreads to everything people touch. The building's ventilation system consists of whatever gaps exist between poorly fitted boards, which means that fresh air is scarce while stagnant. Contaminated air recirculates constantly. Carbon dioxide builds up in occupied rooms, causing headaches and fatigue, while the lack of air circulation allows diseases to linger in the atmosphere like unwelcome party guests who refuse to leave. The windows, when they exist, are covered with oiled cloth or animal membranes rather than glass, limiting both light and airflow. Sexually transmitted diseases run rampant through the establishment like competing political parties, each trying to claim territory in your reproductive system. Syphilis, known as the Great Pox, arrived in Europe around 1495 and spread through communities of sex workers like wildfire through a dry forest. The disease progresses through stages, starting with painless sores and eventually leading to madness, paralysis, and death. Medieval treatments involve mercury, which creates its own set of problems including tooth loss, tremors, and gradual poisoning. The mercury treatment deserves special mention for its creative approach to making patients wish they'd never been born. Mercury ointments are rubbed into the skin, causing it to turn gray and develop a metallic sheen. The treatment makes your teeth fall out, causes violent tremors, and slowly destroys your nervous system. The saying, "mad as a hatter," comes from hat makers who used mercury in their trade, but sex workers received even higher doses applied directly to infected areas. Gonorrhea, called the clap even in medieval times, causes burning urination and discharge that medieval people treated with a variety of herbal remedies that were about as effective as thoughts and prayers. The infection can spread to other parts of the body, causing arthritis, heart problems, and infertility. Though in this profession, the inability to conceive might be considered a blessing rather than a curse. The name, clap, possibly derives from the French clapoir, meaning brothel, highlighting the association between the disease and sex work. Historians still argue whether medieval people understood the connection between sexual activity and these diseases, but the evidence suggests they recognized the correlation while lacking any effective treatments. The moral interpretation was that God was punishing sinful behavior, which provided a convenient excuse for society to ignore the suffering while maintaining the fiction that virtue protected the innocent. Respiratory diseases thrive in the crowded, poorly ventilated environment. Pneumonia kills with ruthless efficiency, filling your lungs with fluid until you literally drown in your own secretions. The medieval understanding of lung disease blamed bad air or miasmas, which wasn't entirely wrong but led to treatments that ranged from useless to actively harmful. Bloodletting was a common treatment for pneumonia, which weakened patients when they most needed their strength to fight infection. The common cold, while not fatal, becomes a constant companion in environments where dozens of people share sleeping spaces and have no understanding of how respiratory infections spread. You develop a chronic cough, congestion, and fatigue that never fully resolves because there's always another infected person ready to pass along their germs. The lack of tissues means people wipe their noses on their sleeves or hands, spreading viruses to everything they touch. Skin diseases flourish in the unwashed environment. Impetigo creates crusty sores that spread across your body like a medieval skin map marking territories of infection. Cellulitis causes red, swollen patches that can rapidly progress to life-threatening blood poisoning. Fungal infections thrive in the warm, moist environment, causing everything from athlete's foot to more exotic conditions that medieval people couldn't name but recognized as harbingers of death. Ringworm, despite its name, is actually a fungal infection that creates circular patches of scaly, itchy skin. It spreads through direct contact and contaminated clothing, making it nearly impossible to avoid in communal living situations. The medieval treatment involved applying various poultices and ointments that usually made the condition worse by trapping moisture against the infected skin. The diet of bread, thin gruel, and scraps creates perfect conditions for nutritional deficiency diseases. Scurvy, caused by lack of vitamin C, starts with fatigue and joint pain before progressing to bleeding gums, loose teeth, and wounds that won't heal. Your teeth begin falling out one by one, and old injuries reopen as your body literally falls apart at the cellular level. Medieval people knew that certain foods prevented scurvy, but fresh fruits and vegetables were expensive luxuries beyond the reach of most sex workers. Rickets, caused by vitamin D deficiency, softens your bones until they bend under your body weight. Children are particularly susceptible, developing the characteristic bow legs and hunched backs that mark them as survivors of medieval malnutrition. Adults can develop osteomalacia, a similar condition that causes bone pain and fractures from minor injuries. The lack of sunlight in crowded, dim buildings compounds the vitamin D deficiency caused by poor diet. Pellagra, caused by niacin deficiency, creates the 4DS dermatitis, diarrhea, dementia, and death. The skin lesions are particularly noticeable on areas exposed to sunlight, creating a distinctive pattern that medieval people associated with divine punishment rather than nutritional deficiency. The mental symptoms of pellagra, including confusion and hallucinations, were often interpreted as signs of demonic possession or divine madness. The building's rodent population serves as a reservoir for various diseases. Rats carry fleas that spread plague, but they also host other pathogens including hantavirus and rat bite fever. The rats are bold enough to steal food from your hands and have been known to attack sleeping people, particularly infants and the infirm. Their droppings contaminate food stores and create clouds of infected dust when disturbed. Medieval rats were typically larger than modern varieties, having grown fat on human waste and garbage. Mice spread different diseases, including lymphocytic choriomeningitis and salmonella. Their urine dries into crystalline deposits that become airborne when disturbed, allowing respiratory transmission of various pathogens. The constant scratching and scurrying sounds they make inside the walls create a soundtrack of infestation that accompanies you into your nightmares. The mice are particularly attracted to grain stores, contaminating food supplies with their droppings and urine. Food poisoning is a constant threat in an environment where meat spoils in the open air and cooking temperatures are determined by guesswork rather than thermometers. Salmonella, E. coli, and other bacterial infections cause violent vomiting and diarrhea that can quickly lead to fatal dehydration. The medieval understanding of food safety was limited to avoiding obviously rotten items, which left plenty of room for contamination that wasn't immediately visible. The kitchen's hygiene practices would terrify modern health inspectors. The same surfaces used for raw meat preparation also serve for bread cutting, vegetable chopping, and serving prepared food. Knives are rarely washed between uses, and the cutting boards are wooden planks that absorb bacteria like sponges. The cook's hands, unwashed for days at a time, transfer pathogens from raw ingredients to ready-to-eat foods with reliable consistency. Cross-contamination occurs at every stage of food preparation and service. Plates are wiped clean with rags rather than washed, allowing bacteria to build up in layers like sedimentary rock formations of disease. Utensils pass from person to person without cleaning, creating efficient transmission pathways for oral pathogens. The wooden bowls used for serving develop deep grooves from repeated scraping, creating perfect hiding places for bacteria that no amount of wiping can remove. Milk, when available, is never pasteurized and often comes from diseased cows. Tuberculosis spreads from infected cattle to humans through contaminated milk, while other bacterial infections cause immediate gastrointestinal distress. The milk is often watered down and sometimes mixed with chalk or other adulterants to increase volume, adding new sources of contamination to an already dangerous product. Eggs are stored at room temperature for weeks before consumption, allowing salmonella to multiply to dangerous levels. The shells are often cracked or dirty, providing easy entry points for bacteria. Medieval people had no understanding of refrigeration or the connection between temperature and bacterial growth, so they simply ate eggs until they were obviously rotten. Preserved meats, salted or smoked to extend their shelf life, often harbored botulism and other toxins that developed during the preservation process. The salt used for preservation was often contaminated with sand, dirt, and other impurities that added their own health risks. Smoked meats were frequently underprocessed, leaving dangerous bacteria alive in the center of the product. As you settle into your first full day in this biological warfare laboratory disguised as a workplace, you begin to understand why medieval life expectancy was so short and why people embraced religious concepts of suffering and purification. They weren't being metaphorical, they were living in actual hell, and disease was the devil's most reliable lieutenant. Every surface you touch, every breath you take, and every morsel you swallow carries the potential for another infection to add to your growing collection of medical conditions. The medieval brothel represents the perfect storm of disease transmission crowded conditions, poor sanitation, contaminated water, inadequate nutrition, and constant exposure to infected individuals. It's a masterclass in how not to maintain public health, and you're enrolled whether you want to be or not. As the sun climbs higher and the establishment begins its daily business, you're about to meet your customer's rogues gallery of humanity that would make a zombie apocalypse look like a church picnic. The clientele of a medieval brothel represents every layer of society's unwashed, unhinged, and utterly unpleasant members, each bringing their own special blend of violence, disease, and creative interpretations of basic human decency. Your first customer shuffles through the door like death taking a casual stroll. He's a peasant farmer whose idea of personal hygiene involves an annual dip in the river if the mood strikes him, which it rarely does. His clothes haven't been washed since the Norman conquest, and they've developed their own ecosystem of mold, bacteria, and small insects that have set up permanent residence in the fabric. The smell precedes him by several feet, a combination of pig manure, rotting vegetables, and human sweat that's been fermenting for decades. His hands are caked with dirt that's part soil, part manure, and part unidentifiable organic matter that you really don't want to think about. His fingernails are black crescents of accumulated filth that harbor enough bacteria to launch a medieval biological warfare campaign. When he touches you, he leaves behind samples of every surface he's encountered in the past month, from barnyard floors to privy walls, creating a living museum of rural contamination on your skin. The peasant's breath could knock a vulture off a garbage wagon. Medieval dental care for the lower classes consists mainly of pulling teeth when the pain becomes unbearable, leaving behind infected sockets and rotting stumps. His remaining teeth are brown and green, with pieces of food from last week still wedged between them. The smell of decay from his mouth mingles with the alcohol he's consumed to dull the pain of his existence, creating an aromatic cocktail that makes you question your will to live. His conversation skills are limited to grunts, complaints about the weather, and detailed descriptions of his various ailments, which include but are not limited to suppurating wounds that won't heal, a chronic cough that produces colorful phlegm, and digestive issues that he describes with the enthusiasm of a wine connoisseur discussing vintage varietals. He expects you to be impressed by his ability to afford your services despite spending his last copper coins on ale, and he views your lack of enthusiasm as a personal insult worthy of violent retribution. The peasant's sexual expectations have been shaped by his experience with barnyard animals and his wife, who learned to lie perfectly still and think about her vegetable garden. He has no concept of consent, foreplay, or basic human consideration, viewing the transaction as purchasing the right to do whatever he wants without regard for your comfort, safety, or survival. His idea of romance involves wiping his nose on his sleeve before touching you, which passes for courtesy in his social circle. Next comes a traveling merchant who fancies himself worldly and sophisticated despite being neither. He's collected diseases from every port between here and Constantinople, turning his body into a walking exhibition of international pathogens. His clothes are expensive but filthy, having traveled thousands of miles without seeing soap or water. He speaks multiple languages, which allows him to insult you and make unreasonable demands in several tongues while expecting you to be grateful for the cultural experience. The merchant carries with him exotic parasites that medieval Europe has never seen before: tropical worms, foreign varieties of lice, and skin conditions that would puzzle modern dermatologists. His travels have exposed him to diseases that won't reach Europe for centuries, making him a time-traveling plague-bearer who spreads tomorrow's epidemics today. He's particularly proud of a rash he picked up in the Byzantine Empire, describing it in detail while expecting you to admire his well-traveled sophistication. His sexual practices have been influenced by his worldwide travels, meaning he's learned creative ways to be disgusting in multiple cultural traditions. He views local customs as suggestions rather than requirements and expects you to appreciate his international expertise in perversion. He pays in foreign coins that may or may not be valuable, often shortchanging you with currency from defunct kingdoms or pieces of metal he's filed down to look like legitimate tender. Knights arrive like armored disasters, clanking through the door with the subtlety of a cavalry charge and twice the arrogance. They've spent months on campaign, living in their armor and bathing approximately never. The metal has developed its own patina of rust, blood, and bodily fluids that creates a unique chemical reaction against their unwashed skin. Removing the armor reveals a human being who's been marinating in his own secretions for so long that his skin has taken on a leather-like texture. These noble warriors bring battlefield diseases collected from across Europe and beyond. Camp fever, dysentery, and infections from untreated wounds create a walking medical emergency that expects royal treatment despite looking like an extra from a zombie movie. Their hands are stained with blood, sometimes from battle, sometimes from less noble activities, and they view violence as an appropriate response to any inconvenience, no matter how minor. The knight's concept of chivalry doesn't extend to sex workers, whom he views as slightly more valuable than livestock but significantly less worthy of consideration than his horse. He expects you to be honored by his attention while he describes in graphic detail the atrocities he's committed in service of his lord. His idea of pillow talk involves war stories that would make a modern therapist recommend immediate psychiatric intervention. Military campaigns have taught him creative uses for everyday objects as weapons, knowledge he's eager to demonstrate on anyone who displeases him. He wears spurs designed to control warhorses and sees no reason to remove them for indoor activities, leaving bleeding scratches on anyone unfortunate enough to be in close contact with him. His sexual aggression has been honed by months of violence and the knowledge that society will support whatever he does to maintain his warrior reputation. Priests shuffle in under cover of darkness, their religious robes hiding a multitude of sins and an impressive collection of sexually transmitted diseases. They justify their visits through theological contortions that would impress Olympic gymnasts, explaining how their sacred duty to understand human weakness requires hands-on research with fallen women. Their hypocrisy is matched only by their creativity in finding scriptural justification for whatever depraved acts they have in mind. The clergy's celibacy vows have created a pressure cooker of repressed sexuality that explodes in directions that would surprise their congregations. They've spent years denying natural urges, which has twisted their desires into shapes that defy both physics and common sense. They expect you to play along with elaborate fantasy scenarios involving confession, penance, and religious instruction that bear no resemblance to actual theology. Church politics have taught them to be secretive, manipulative, and utterly ruthless in protecting their reputations. They threaten excommunication, eternal damnation, and earthly punishment for anyone who reveals their activities, while simultaneously demanding increasingly extreme services to satisfy their corrupted appetites. Their knowledge of Latin allows them to deliver threats and insults in a dead language, which they believe makes their cruelty more sophisticated. The priest's personal hygiene reflects his belief that the body is sinful and should be mortified through neglect. He hasn't bathed since his ordination, viewing cleanliness as vanity and dirt as proof of his spiritual dedication. His hair is crawling with lice that he's named after various saints, and his robes haven't been washed since they were blessed by the bishop decades ago. Local officials arrive with the entitled swagger of corrupt bureaucrats throughout history. Tax collectors, magistrates, and town guards view your services as part of their unofficial compensation package, expecting free access in exchange for their protection from the very laws they're sworn to uphold. They're skilled at finding violations of local ordinances that require immediate on-site payment in services rather than coin. These petty tyrants have mastered the art of making life miserable for anyone who displeases them, and they take particular pleasure in demonstrating their power over those who can't fight back. They know every loophole in local law and every corrupt official who can be bribed to look the other way. Their protection comes at a price that increases regularly, and they're creative in finding new fees and regulations that require personal attention. The town guard captain arrives drunk on power and cheap ale, his authority extended by a rusty sword and the backing of equally corrupt colleagues. He views the brothel as his personal fiefdom, where he can indulge fantasies of absolute control without the inconvenience of legal oversight. His uniform is stained with evidence of his various crimes, and his breath reeks of the ale he's consumed to forget the atrocities he's committed in service of local politics. Historians still argue whether medieval society's hypocrisy regarding sex work was more pronounced than in other historical periods, but the evidence suggests that the gap between public morality and private behavior reached artistic levels of creative self-deception. The same men who publicly condemned moral decay were often the brothel's best customers, creating a system of institutionalized dishonesty that corrupted everyone it touched. Artisans and craftsmen arrive with hands permanently stained by their trades, blacksmiths with burns and metallic poisoning, tanners reeking of the chemicals used to cure leather, and butchers whose clothes are permanently saturated with blood and animal fat. Each profession brings its own occupational hazards and distinctive odors that combine to create an olfactory nightmare that defies description. The blacksmith's hands are covered with burn scars and embedded with metal particles that create infected wounds across his fingers and palms. His strength, developed from years of swinging heavy hammers, makes him dangerous when alcohol enhances his natural aggression. He views delicate treatment as weakness and expects you to endure whatever force he applies without complaint or resistance. Tanners work with urine, animal brains, and toxic chemicals that preserve leather while slowly poisoning anyone who handles them regularly. They smell like a combination of death and industrial waste, and their skin has been stained and scarred by constant exposure to caustic substances. Their trade has given them intimate knowledge of how to remove skin and preserve organic tissue, knowledge that becomes disturbing when they describe it in detail while drunk. Butchers carry the permanent scent of blood and decomposition, their clothes stained with the evidence of their profession. They're skilled with knives and have developed a casual attitude toward violence that extends beyond their professional duties. Their hands are scarred from handling sharp tools and contaminated with bacteria from the various animals they've processed. Drunken soldiers on leave stumble through the door like mobile disasters, their judgment impaired by alcohol and their inhibitions destroyed by months of sanctioned violence. They travel in groups that encourage each other's worst behavior, turning individual stupidity into collective catastrophe. Their military training has taught them to solve problems through force, and they see no reason to change tactics for civilian interactions. Young nobles seeking to prove their manhood arrive with more money than sense and expectations shaped by romantic ballads that bear no resemblance to reality. They expect their social status to impress you despite their obvious inexperience and their tendency to panic at the first sign of genuine human contact. Their sheltered upbringing has left them completely unprepared for the realities of adult relationships, making them dangerous in their unpredictability. As the day progresses and the parade of human wreckage continues, you begin to understand that your clients aren't just customers' theory active threats to your survival who happen to pay for the privilege of endangering your life. Each one brings new diseases, new violence, and new ways to make your existence more miserable than you thought possible. And the truly terrifying part? These are the respectable members of society, the ones with enough money and social standing to afford your services. The worst customers are yet to come. When illness inevitably strikes, and in this disease-soaked environment, it's not a matter of if but when and how many times you discover that medieval medicine operates on the same scientific principles as medieval architecture. It looks impressive from a distance, but up close you realize it's held together by wishful thinking and divine intervention. The medical practitioners who arrive to treat the various ailments plaguing the brothel represent a collection of quacks, charlatans, and well-meaning incompetents whose treatments are often more dangerous than the diseases they claim to cure. The local physician arrives with the confidence of someone who's read exactly one medical text and considers himself an expert on all matters related to the human body. His education consists primarily of memorizing the works of ancient Greek and Roman physicians whose understanding of anatomy was based on dissecting pigs and making educated guesses about human physiology. He carries a leather bag filled with instruments that look more suited for medieval torture than medical treatment, and his treatment philosophy centers on the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, whose balance supposedly determines health and disease. According to this learned practitioner, every ailment results from an imbalance in these mystical fluids, and the solution involves removing the excess humor through bloodletting, purging, or induced vomiting. Got a fever? You have too much blood, so let's drain several pints and see what happens. Suffering from depression? Clearly, an excess of black bile requires immediate purging with powerful laxatives that will empty your digestive system faster than a medieval siege empties a granary. The physician's diagnostic techniques rely heavily on examining your urine, which he swirls in glass containers while making profound observations about its color, clarity, and smell. He has charts showing dozens of different urine colors, each supposedly indicating specific medical conditions, though his interpretations seem to depend more on his mood than any scientific methodology. Dark urine means liver problems, cloudy urine suggests kidney issues, and red urine indicates that you're probably going to die, but not before receiving several expensive treatments that will ensure you die broke as well as sick. Bloodletting represents the pinnacle of medieval medical sophistication, practiced with religious devotion and complete disregard for basic hygiene. The physician produces a collection of brass cups and a sharp knife that hasn't been cleaned since the last patient, explaining that removing bad blood will restore your natural balance and cure whatever's wrong with you. He makes incisions in your arms, legs, or wherever seems convenient, then applies heated cups to create suction that draws blood from your weakened body. The amount of blood removed depends on your perceived social status, the phase of the moon, and the physician's financial needs. Peasants get minimal bloodletting because they can't afford extensive treatment, while wealthy clients receive the full medieval medical experience, which often includes enough blood loss to cause fainting, shock, and occasionally death from acute anemia. The physician considers successful treatment to be any outcome where the patient survives long enough to pay his fees. Leeches represent the more sophisticated approach to bloodletting, imported from distant swamps and applied to various parts of your body with the ceremony of a religious ritual. These medical marvels are supposed to remove bad blood more selectively than crude cutting, though they also inject anticoagulants that prevent clotting and can cause dangerous bleeding. The leeches themselves carry their own diseases, adding new infections to your growing collection while supposedly curing the old ones. The physician maintains a stock of leeches in clay jars filled with swamp water, creating a breeding ground for bacteria that would impress modern biological warfare researchers. The leeches are reused from patient to patient without any sterilization, making them efficient vectors for transmitting diseases throughout the establishment. After feeding, they're stored in the same containers until needed again, growing fat on contaminated blood from dozens of infected patients. Purging involves administering powerful laxatives designed to empty your digestive system with the thoroughness of a medieval tax collector. The physician produces bottles of various concoctions made from mercury, antimony, and plant extracts that cause violent diarrhea and vomiting. The theory suggests that eliminating waste products will restore your body's natural balance, though the reality involves dehydration, electrolyte imbalance, and sometimes death from the cure rather than the disease. The purging medications are mixed according to recipes passed down through generations of physicians, with dosages determined by guesswork and adjusted based on the patient's ability to survive the treatment. Mercury compounds are particularly popular because they produce dramatic results, causing profuse sweating, excessive salivation, and tooth loss that convinces everyone that the medicine is working. The fact that mercury is slowly poisoning the patient is considered a minor side effect compared to the obvious therapeutic benefits. Induced vomiting completes the trinity of medieval medical interventions, designed to eliminate bad humors through the upper digestive tract. The physician administers various plant extracts and chemical compounds that cause violent retching, supposedly expelling the toxins responsible for your illness. The vomiting is often so severe that patients risk choking on their own vomit, but the physician considers this a sign that the treatment is working effectively. The emetic compounds used to induce vomiting are often more toxic than the original disease, containing heavy metals and plant alkaloids that damage the liver, kidneys, and nervous system. Repeated treatments with these substances cause permanent organ damage, creating chronic health problems that require additional medical intervention, which the physician is happy to provide for appropriate compensation. Surgical procedures in medieval brothels represent medical horror at its most creative. The physician's surgical instruments include rusty knives, crude saws, and metal probes that look like they were designed for archaeological excavation rather than medical treatment. Anesthesia consists of strong alcohol or opium if you're lucky, though most procedures are performed on fully conscious patients who are expected to endure whatever cutting, drilling, or amputation the physician deems necessary. Wound treatment involves packing injuries with various substances that medieval physicians believe promote healing. These include spider webs, which actually do have some antimicrobial properties, though they're usually contaminated with dirt and insect parts that cause secondary infections. Other popular wound treatments include ground pearls, powdered unicorn horn, usually ground rhinoceros horn or horse hooves, and various plant extracts mixed with wine or honey. The physician's understanding of anatomy is based on ancient texts rather than direct observation, leading to creative interpretations of how the human body actually works. He believes that blood is manufactured in the liver, that the heart has two chambers, and that the brain's primary function is cooling the body rather than controlling thoughts and emotions. These misconceptions lead to treatments that attack healthy organs while ignoring the actual source of disease. Trepanation, the practice of drilling holes in the skull, is recommended for headaches, mental illness, and various other conditions that the physician attributes to pressure imbalances in the head. The procedure involves using a crude drill to bore through the skull bone, supposedly releasing evil spirits or excess pressure that's causing the patient's symptoms. The drilling is done without anesthesia, and the survival rate is approximately what you'd expect from having holes drilled in your head with medieval tools. The physician's surgical success is measured by the patient's ability to survive the procedure rather than any actual improvement in their condition. He maintains detailed records of his treatments, which read like medieval horror stories filled with descriptions of procedures that would violate every principle of modern medical ethics. These records serve as advertising materials, demonstrating his extensive experience with various conditions and his willingness to attempt treatments that other physicians consider too dangerous. Historians still argue whether medieval physicians genuinely believed in the effectiveness of their treatments or simply continued practices they knew were useless because changing established medical doctrine would threaten their professional authority. The evidence suggests a combination of genuine ignorance, professional pride, and economic motivation that created a system where admitting ignorance was more dangerous than killing patients with inappropriate treatment. Herbal remedies represent the more benign end of medieval medical treatment, though even these natural substances can be dangerous when administered by physicians whose understanding of dosage and drug interactions is based on ancient superstitions rather than scientific observation. The physician maintains an extensive collection of dried plants, animal parts, and mineral substances, each supposedly effective against specific conditions according to ancient authorities whose medical knowledge was acquired through trial and error over centuries. Willow bark, which actually does contain aspirin-like compounds, is prescribed for pain relief and fever reduction, though the physician has no understanding of why it works or how to determine appropriate dosages. Patients receive varying amounts of the active compound depending on the age and storage conditions of the bark, leading to unpredictable results ranging from no effect to dangerous overdoses. Digitalis, derived from foxglove plants, is used to treat heart conditions, though medieval physicians don't understand that the difference between a therapeutic dose and a lethal dose is often minimal. Patients who receive too much digitalis experience hallucinations, irregular heartbeat, and death, while those who receive too little get no benefit from the treatment. The physician adjusts dosages based on the patient's response, using a trial-and-error approach that frequently results in accidental poisoning. Opium provides effective pain relief when available, but medieval physicians have no understanding of addiction or tolerance, leading to patients who become dependent on the drug while receiving treatment for unrelated conditions. The opium is often adulterated with other substances to increase bulk and profits, adding new health risks to an already dangerous medication. The physician's pharmaceutical preparations are mixed in unsanitary conditions using contaminated equipment, creating opportunities for bacterial infections that complicate the original medical conditions. His mortar and pestle haven't been properly cleaned in years, harboring bacteria and mold that contaminate every medication he prepares. The storage containers are infested with insects and rodents that add their own contributions to the therapeutic compounds. Mental illness receives special attention from medieval physicians, who attribute psychological problems to demonic possession, moral failings, or imbalances in brain humors that require aggressive intervention. Treatment involves combinations of bloodletting, purging, and exorcism that would traumatize healthy individuals while providing no benefit to patients with genuine psychiatric conditions. The physician collaborates with local clergy to provide comprehensive treatment that addresses both the medical and spiritual aspects of mental illness. This partnership results in treatments that combine medical torture with religious persecution, creating therapeutic approaches that are guaranteed to worsen any psychological condition while providing entertainment for the local community. Pregnancy and childbirth in the brothel environment receive medical attention that makes natural childbirth look like a luxury spa experience. The physician's understanding of obstetrics is based on theories developed by men who had never observed human birth, leading to interventions that increase mortality rates for both mothers and infants. His treatments for pregnancy complications include bloodletting pregnant women, administering mercury compounds to developing fetuses, and performing manual interventions that introduce deadly infections. As you experience medieval medical care firsthand, you begin to understand why most people preferred to suffer in silence rather than seek professional treatment. The physician's confidence in his methods is matched only by his ignorance of their effects, creating a healthcare system where the cure is routinely worse than the disease. Your best hope for survival lies in avoiding medical attention entirely and trusting your body's natural healing abilities, which are infinitely more effective than anything medieval medicine has to offer. Violence in a medieval brothel isn't an occasional occupational hazard, it's the atmospheric pressure that surrounds you constantly, as natural and unavoidable as the stench of unwashed bodies and rotting food. You quickly discover that surviving each day requires the reflexes of a trained assassin, the diplomatic skills of a court ambassador, and the luck of someone who's made a pact with every saint in the medieval calendar. Every interaction carries the potential for sudden, explosive brutality that can end your life before you have time to scream for help that wouldn't come anyway. Your first lesson in brothel violence comes from watching what happens to workers who displease their clients. Margaret, the farmer's daughter who arrived 3 months before you, makes the fatal mistake of refusing a knight's request for services that would violate both the laws of physics and common decency. The knight responds by breaking 3 of her ribs with casual efficiency, explaining that he's paid for the privilege of doing whatever he wants and her job is to survive it if possible. The beating happens in full view of other customers and workers, none of whom intervene because interfering with a night's entertainment could result in their own violent deaths. The madam watches with the detached interest of someone calculating how long Margaret will be out of commission and whether her injuries will affect her earning potential. Medieval society has clear rules about violence against sex workers. It's perfectly acceptable as long as you don't damage them so severely that they can't return to work eventually. Margaret spends the next week coughing blood and struggling to breathe through punctured lungs, while the knight continues his visit as if nothing happened. He even complains about the noise her labored breathing makes, suggesting that someone should do something about it before it ruins the mood for other customers. The incident establishes the hierarchy clearly. Clients have absolute authority to inflict whatever damage they consider appropriate, and your survival depends on anticipating their violence and minimizing the damage when it inevitably occurs. The weapons that clients carry into the brothel represent a museum of medieval mayhem. Knights arrive with swords, daggers, and various specialized instruments designed to cause maximum damage to human bodies. Merchants carry knives for protection during travel, which they're eager to use for entertainment when the mood strikes them. Even peasants bring agricultural tools that double as weapon scythes, hammers, and sharp implements that were designed for farming but work equally well for dismembering sex workers who fail to provide satisfactory service. The building's architecture contributes to the violence by providing numerous opportunities for accidents that can't be distinguished from deliberate attacks. Stairs are poorly constructed and deliberately maintained in dangerous condition, allowing clients to push workers down flights of steps while claiming they simply lost their footing. Loose floorboards create tripping hazards that can be exploited to cause falls onto conveniently placed sharp objects. Windows lack proper barriers, making fatal suicides remarkably common among workers who've outlived their usefulness. Sarah, your mentor in survival, shows you the scars that map her history in the business knife wounds from clients who enjoyed cutting their partners, burn marks from men who heated metal objects in candle flames before applying them to sensitive areas, and bite marks from customers whose sexual practices included literal consumption of human flesh. Each scar represents a lesson in reading dangerous clients and recognizing the warning signs that precede explosive violence. Watch their hands, Sarah whispers as she demonstrates techniques for spotting potentially lethal customers. Men who plan to hurt you always telegraph their intentions through their body language. Clenched fists mean incoming punches. Reaching for weapons happens before stabbing. And men who strip off their belts are planning to use them for something other than holding up their pants. Her survival manual includes dozens of these observations, accumulated through years of dodging death and watching other women fail to do the same. The economic incentives encourage violence by making it profitable for clients and expensive for workers. Customers who engage in violent behavior often pay premium prices for the privilege, while workers who resist or fight back face economic penalties that can result in starvation or ejection from the establishment. The brothel's business model depends on providing clients with experiences they can't get elsewhere, and for many medieval men, that means the opportunity to inflict pain and suffering without legal consequences. Group violence represents a particularly lethal threat when multiple clients decide to collaborate in their entertainment. Medieval men traveling in groups encourage each other's worst behaviors, turning individual cruelty into collective atrocities that push the boundaries of human depravity. Military units on leave, merchant caravans, and groups of young nobles seeking adventure all pose exponentially greater dangers than individual customers because they compete with each other to devise increasingly creative forms of brutality. The pack mentality transforms otherwise manageable clients into dangerous predators who feed off each other's aggression and escalate their violence to maintain their reputations within the group. A single knight might be satisfied with routine abuse, but a group of knights will torture workers to death rather than appear weak to their companions. The social dynamics of medieval masculinity require public demonstrations of dominance and cruelty that treat sex workers as disposable props in elaborate performances of sociopathic behavior. Seasonal violence follows predictable patterns that experienced workers learn to anticipate and fear. Winter brings starving customers who blame their economic desperation on the women they're paying for services, leading to beatings motivated by resentment rather than sexual pleasure. Spring attracts young men whose seasonal hormones combine with medieval concepts of romance to produce stalking behaviors that end in violence when reality fails to match their delusional expectations. Summer campaigns return battle-hardened soldiers whose capacity for violence has been professionally developed and socially rewarded, making them walking weapons who view civilian brutality as recreational activity rather than serious business. Autumn harvests bring flush peasants who celebrate good crops by purchasing the right to inflict the same violence on humans that they've been directing toward animals all year. The staff hierarchy enables violence through carefully maintained power structures that ensure workers can never unite effectively against abusive clients or management. The madam encourages competition between workers, fostering jealousy and resentment that prevents collective action against dangerous customers. Workers who report violent clients are often punished more severely than the clients themselves, creating incentives for silence and acceptance of abuse. New arrivals receive the most dangerous clients as part of their initiation into the business, while experienced workers get preferential treatment that depends on their continued cooperation with management's violent policies. This system ensures that workers who survive long enough to understand the business have too much invested in the hierarchy to risk challenging it, while new workers are eliminated quickly if they're unwilling or unable to accept routine brutality. Internal violence between workers represents another constant threat as desperation and competition create conflicts that escalate into deadly confrontations. Food shortages lead to fights over scraps. Territorial disputes over clients and sleeping spaces result in knife fights, and psychological stress manifests in attacks on convenient targets. The crowded living conditions provide numerous opportunities for conflicts to escalate into violence, while the lack of legal protection means that workers who kill each other face no consequences beyond the displeasure of management. The weapons available to workers for self-defense are limited by their poverty and the management's policies against armed resistance. Kitchen knives disappear quickly when workers attempt to acquire them for protection, and any worker caught with a weapon faces immediate ejection or worse punishment. The few defensive tools available include hairpins that can be sharpened into stilettos, broken pottery that creates effective cutting edges, and improvised clubs made from wooden objects, though using any of these against clients risks provoking even more severe retaliation. Historians still argue whether the violence in medieval brothels was worse than in other contemporary institutions, but the evidence suggests that the combination of social attitudes, economic pressures, and legal vacuum created uniquely dangerous conditions that exceeded even the routine brutality of medieval daily life. The brothel represented a space where society's normal restrictions on violence were suspended, allowing men to indulge their most destructive impulses without fear of consequences. The psychological effects of constant violence create lasting trauma that manifests in various forms of mental illness and self-destructive behavior. Workers develop hypervigilance that makes sleep impossible, jumping at every sound and interpreting innocent gestures as potential threats. The chronic stress of anticipating violence causes physical symptoms including digestive problems, headaches, and immune system suppression that makes workers more susceptible to the diseases already rampant in the establishment. Some workers develop dissociative disorders that allow them to psychologically separate from their physical experiences during violent attacks. While this provides temporary protection from trauma, it also leaves them vulnerable to more severe abuse because they can't respond appropriately to escalating threats. Others become violently aggressive themselves, attacking clients, fellow workers, or random targets in desperate attempts to regain some sense of control over their environment. The management's response to worker trauma focuses on maintaining productivity rather than providing support or protection. Workers who become too damaged to function effectively are replaced rather than treated, while those who attempt to process their trauma through emotional expression face punishment for disturbing the establishment's business operations. Crying, screaming, or other normal responses to violence are treated as disciplinary problems that threaten customer satisfaction. Religious violence adds another dimension to the brutality as clergy members combine sexual sadism with theological justifications for their behavior. Priests who visit the brothel often bring instruments of penance that they apply to workers in elaborate rituals that blur the lines between religious ceremony and torture. They explain their violence as spiritual cleansing necessary for the worker's salvation, turning physical abuse into acts of religious devotion that serve God while satisfying their personal sadistic impulses. The Church's official position condemns violence against all people while simultaneously teaching that sex workers deserve whatever punishment befalls them as consequences of their sinful choices. This theological contradiction allows religious clients to engage in extreme violence while maintaining their status as moral authorities in their communities. The cognitive dissonance required to reconcile Christian compassion with sadistic brutality doesn't seem to trouble medieval clergy, who've mastered the art of compartmentalizing their public virtue and private vices. Legal authorities not only fail to protect sex workers from violence but actively participate in the abuse through official and unofficial channels. Town guards who patrol the brothel district view the establishment as their personal entertainment venue, where they can indulge violent fantasies while claiming to maintain public order. Judges who handle complaints against clients interpret violence as normal business transactions rather than criminal acts requiring punishment. The legal system's hostility towards sex workers means that reporting violence often results in punishment for the victim rather than the perpetrator. Women who survive attacks and seek justice face charges of disturbing the peace, making false accusations, or attempting to extort respectable citizens. The courts assume that anyone working in a brothel has forfeited the right to legal protection, creating a system where violence against sex workers is effectively decriminalized. As you navigate this landscape of institutional brutality, you begin to understand that violence isn't an unfortunate side effect of the business, it's the primary product being sold. Clients don't pay for sex as much as they pay for the right to inflict suffering without consequences, and the establishment's entire operation is designed to facilitate this exchange. Your survival depends not on avoiding violence, but on managing it carefully enough to remain functional while slowly dying from accumulated trauma and physical damage. The economic system governing your new workplace operates with the ruthless efficiency of a medieval torture device specifically designed to extract maximum value while ensuring you can never escape its grinding mechanisms. You quickly discover that the financial arrangements aren't just unfavorable. They're a masterpiece of economic engineering that would impress modern loan sharks while making medieval serfs look like privileged aristocrats enjoying generous benefit packages. Your introduction to brothel economics begins with the madam's cheerful explanation of the fee structure, delivered with the warm smile of someone about to sell you into permanent debt slavery. Everything costs money here, dearie, she explains while mentally calculating how long you'll survive and how much profit she can extract before you die or become too damaged to attract customers. The initial fees include room rental, bed rental, candle rental, and breathing rental. Yes, they actually charge you for the privilege of consuming the establishment's air. The room you're assigned costs more per night than most peasants earn in a week, despite being smaller than a modern closet and infested with creatures that would make a plague ship jealous. The rent is due daily, in advance, regardless of whether you've earned anything or even worked at all. Sick days, injuries, and periods of low customer demand don't reduce your financial obligations, they simply increase your accumulated debt, which grows with compound interest at rates that would make Renaissance bankers weep with envy. Your bed, such as it is, carries separate rental fees that increase based on demand and your perceived earning potential. The straw mattress costs extra. The threadbare blanket requires additional payment, and even the privilege of lying down during breaks comes with hourly charges. The madam maintains detailed records of your bed usage, tracking every minute you spend resting and billing accordingly. Sleep becomes a luxury you literally can't afford, creating a cycle of exhaustion that reduces your earning capacity while increasing your expenses. Food costs are calculated with medieval precision, meaning every crumb comes with itemized charges that would challenge modern accounting software. A bowl of thin gruel costs a day's earnings. A piece of bread requires 2 customers. And anything resembling actual nutrition demands payment that exceeds most workers' weekly income. The kitchen operates on a credit system that charges interest on meals, creating food debt that accumulates faster than you can earn money to pay it off. The establishment's credit terms make modern payday loans look like charitable donations. Interest compounds daily. Late fees apply to payments made even minutes after the arbitrary deadlines. And collection methods include violence, starvation, and creative punishments that reduce your earning potential while increasing your debt burden. The mathematical beauty of the system ensures that working harder and earning more money actually increases your total debt rather than reducing it. Clothing represents another revenue stream that would impress a medieval tax collector's creativity. Your work outfit is provided by the establishment at rental rates that exceed the cost of purchasing similar garments, but you're forbidden from bringing your own clothing or seeking alternatives elsewhere. Damage to the garments, which is inevitable given the nature of your work and the violent tendencies of your clients, results in replacement charges that exceed your weekly earnings. The laundry service charges premium rates for cleaning clothes that were already filthy when you received them, using washing techniques that damage the fabric and require frequent replacements that you pay for through extended payment plans with crushing interest rates. Soap, water, and cleaning time are all itemized expenses that ensure your clothing costs consume most of your income while providing garments that offer no protection from either the elements or your client's more destructive tendencies. Medical expenses represent the system's crowning achievement in creative exploitation. Every injury, illness, or health problem requires treatment that you pay for regardless of whether it helps, harms, or kills you. The physician charges consultation fees for looking at you, diagnostic fees for guessing what's wrong, treatment fees for procedures that usually make things worse, and recovery fees for the privilege of surviving his interventions. Medicine costs more than gold. Literally, the mercury compounds used to treat syphilis are priced higher than equivalent weights of precious metals, while herbal remedies that grow wild in nearby fields command prices that would make spice merchants jealous. The physician's bills compound monthly, with late payment penalties that increase your medical debt faster than his treatments destroy your health. Dying doesn't eliminate your medical debt. It simply transfers the obligation to anyone foolish enough to be associated with you. The protection racket operates with transparent corruption that medieval authorities consider normal business practice. Local guards collect weekly payments for not arresting you on manufactured charges, while judges require monthly bribes to avoid sentencing you for crimes you haven't committed. Tax collectors demand payment for services you never receive, and church officials expect donations to ensure your soul's salvation from the sins of your profession. These protection costs increase regularly based on inflation, political changes, and the official's personal financial needs. Elections bring new authorities who demand introductory payments to establish working relationships, while religious holidays require special donations to demonstrate your commitment to community values. War taxes support military campaigns you'll never benefit from, while peace taxes fund celebrations you're not allowed to attend. The establishment's internal economy operates on a token system that ensures you never receive actual money that could be used elsewhere. Your earnings are converted into brothel currency that can only be spent at establishment businesses, all of which charge inflated prices for substandard goods and services. The exchange rate between tokens and real money fluctuates based on the madam's mood and financial needs, usually becoming less favorable whenever you accumulate enough tokens to consider purchasing something useful. The token system includes expiration dates that ensure unused earnings disappear if not spent quickly enough, while the limited selection of available purchases forces you to buy overpriced necessities that don't address your actual needs. Attempting to trade tokens with other workers is forbidden and results in penalties that exceed the value of the attempted transaction, while converting tokens back to real money requires paying exchange fees that consume most of their value. Customer payment disputes represent another source of financial instability that always resolves against your interests. Clients who claim dissatisfaction with services receive refunds from your earnings, regardless of whether their complaints have any basis in reality. The dispute resolution process favors customers whose social status and payment capacity make them valuable to the establishment, while your testimony is considered worthless compared to the word of paying clients. The refund system incentivizes customer complaints by making them profitable for clients and expensive for workers. Customers learn that claiming dissatisfaction results in free services and cash refunds, creating a business model that rewards dishonesty and punishes workers for circumstances beyond their control. The establishment's customer service policies prioritize maintaining relationships with wealthy clients over protecting workers from fraudulent claims and financial abuse. Seasonal fluctuations in demand create additional financial instability that the economic system exploits rather than accommodates. Winter brings fewer customers and lower earnings, but expenses remain constant or increase to compensate for reduced revenue. Summer campaigns remove military customers while increasing security costs and protection payments, creating periods of high expenses with reduced income potential. Holiday seasons bring moral crusades that temporarily close the establishment while maintaining your financial obligations, creating periods where you accumulate debt without any opportunity to earn income. Religious observances ban business operations while requiring special payments to demonstrate community compliance, making holy days financially devastating for workers who depend on daily earnings to survive. The debt collection system operates with medieval efficiency, using methods that would impress modern organized crime syndicates while maintaining the appearance of legitimate business practices. Failure to make payments results in increased interest rates, additional fees, and physical punishments that reduce your earning capacity while increasing your debt burden. The collection process includes public humiliation, dietary restrictions, and work assignments that damage your health while generating minimal income. Historians still argue whether the economic exploitation in medieval brothels was worse than contemporary practices in other industries, but the evidence suggests that sex work represented the perfection of predatory capitalism centuries before the term was invented. The combination of social stigma, legal vulnerability, and economic desperation created conditions where normal market forces were suspended in favor of pure exploitation. Escape from the debt system requires accumulating enough money to pay off all outstanding obligations while covering the exit fees, departure taxes, and relocation costs that the establishment imposes on anyone attempting to leave. The mathematical impossibility of achieving this goal while working within the system ensures that workers remain trapped regardless of their earnings, creating a form of economic slavery that's more effective than chains because it convinces victims that freedom is theoretically possible. The few workers who manage to accumulate savings face additional challenges from theft, confiscation, and mandatory purchases that eliminate their reserves just as escape becomes possible. The Madam maintains detailed surveillance of worker finances, ensuring that anyone approaching financial independence faces emergencies, health crises, or disciplinary actions that consume their accumulated resources. Banking services, when available, operate under terms that make the establishment's internal economy look generous by comparison. External moneylenders charge interest rates that exceed your earning potential, while security for loans includes your life, health, and any remaining freedom. The few legitimate banking options are closed to sex workers, who are considered unacceptable credit risks regardless of their actual financial capacity. Investment opportunities consist mainly of purchasing better positions within the establishment's hierarchy, which cost more than most workers can ever earn while providing minimal improvements in working conditions or financial stability. The promotion system operates on bribes rather than merit, ensuring that advancement requires payments that exceed the benefits of improved status. As you navigate this economic maze, you begin to understand that the financial system isn't designed to provide fair compensation for services rendered. It's engineered to extract maximum value from human desperation while maintaining the illusion that hard work and smart choices can lead to freedom. Every aspect of the economy is carefully calibrated to keep workers trapped in perpetual debt while generating profits for owners who've perfected the art of monetizing human misery. Your financial education in medieval brothel economics teaches you that slavery doesn't require chains when debt provides more effective bondage. And freedom isn't eliminated through force when economic systems make it mathematically impossible to achieve. The true genius of the system lies in convincing workers that their poverty results from personal failures rather than institutional design, creating a form of psychological control that's more powerful than physical restraint. The law enforcement system surrounding your new workplace operates with the moral flexibility of a medieval contortionist and the ethical standards of a plague-carrying rat. You quickly discover that legal authorities don't just ignore crimes against sex workers. The created an elaborate framework that transforms justice into a profit center while treating your safety as a commodity that's perpetually out of stock and overpriced when available. The local sheriff arrives for his weekly collection with the swagger of a medieval mob boss and twice the corruption. His uniform is decorated with badges of office that he's purchased rather than earned, and his authority extends exactly as far as his ability to intimidate people who can't fight back. He views the brothel district as his personal kingdom where normal laws are suspended in favor of whatever arbitrary rules generate the most revenue for his retirement fund. His protection services operate on a sliding fee scale based on the severity of crimes you want ignored and the social status of criminals you need protected from. Simple assault costs a few copper coins to overlook, while attempted murder requires silver payments, and actual homicide demands gold compensation that exceeds most workers' annual earnings. The price list is updated regularly based on market conditions, inflation, and the sheriff's personal financial needs. The sheriff's interpretation of justice follows medieval economic principles: whoever pays the most gets the most favorable treatment, while anyone without money receives whatever punishment is most convenient for the authorities. His court operates like an auction house where legal outcomes are sold to the highest bidder, and your testimony carries roughly the same weight as the opinion of a deceased chicken. Municipal guards patrol the brothel district with the dedication of tax collectors and the compassion of medieval torturers. Their primary function involves extracting bribes from workers while providing protection that consists mainly of not beating you to death immediately. They charge weekly fees for basic security services that include not robbing you themselves, not arresting you on fabricated charges, and not selling information about your activities to your enemies. The guard patrol system operates on a protection racket model that would impress organized crime syndicates throughout history. Failure to pay weekly tribute results in increased surveillance, harassment of customers, and mysterious accidents that demonstrate the importance of maintaining good relationships with local law enforcement. The guards maintain detailed records of who's paid and who owes money, using this information to target workers who fall behind on their protection payments. Individual guards supplement their official wages through freelance criminal activities that include robbery, assault, and extortion services available to anyone willing to pay their modest fees. They offer competitive rates for intimidating workers, roughing up uncooperative clients, and disposing of evidence from crimes that might embarrass their more affluent customers. Their entrepreneurial approach to law enforcement creates additional revenue streams while maintaining the appearance of official duties. Court proceedings involving sex workers follow legal traditions that combine medieval jurisprudence with creative interpretation that favors anyone with money, social status, or political connections. The judge arrives at predetermined conclusions before hearing any evidence, then conducts elaborate theatrical performances that create the illusion of justice while delivering outcomes that support the existing power structure. Your legal standing in medieval courts ranks somewhere between livestock and inanimate objects, meaning you can be bought, sold, damaged, or destroyed without triggering serious legal consequences for the responsible parties. Witnesses against you receive credibility bonuses based on their social class, while your testimony is automatically suspect because of your profession's association with dishonesty, moral corruption, and general untrustworthiness. Legal representation, when available, operates according to medieval attorney ethics that prioritize client payments over client outcomes. Lawyers charge fees that exceed your lifetime earnings for services that consist mainly of explaining why your case is hopeless and negotiating plea agreements that minimize inconvenience for the court rather than protecting your interests. The few attorneys willing to represent sex workers specialize in losing cases quickly and efficiently while maintaining cordial relationships with judges and prosecutors. The legal system's approach to crimes against sex workers reflects society's view that violence against you represents property damage rather than assault against a human being. Clients who beat you face fines equivalent to damaging someone else's livestock. While murder charges are typically reduced to destruction of property with penalties that amount to modest replacement costs, the legal framework treats your death as an economic loss for the establishment rather than a crime against a person. Evidence collection in cases involving sex workers follows procedures designed to ensure that no useful information reaches the court. Physical evidence disappears from storage. Witnesses develop sudden memory problems, and documentation gets lost in bureaucratic systems that operate with the efficiency of medieval sewage processing. The few pieces of evidence that survive the collection process are usually inadmissible due to technical violations of procedures that exist specifically to eliminate inconvenient facts. Criminal investigations involving brothel crimes receive the same thorough attention that medieval authorities devoted to tracking down stolen chickens, which is to say, none at all unless someone important demands results. Investigators charge consultation fees for examining crime scenes, evidence analysis fees for looking at clues, and resolution fees for arriving at conclusions that protect their relationships with wealthy suspects. The witness protection program consists mainly of threats against anyone who might testify against important criminals, combined with offers of modest payments for witnesses willing to support alternative explanations for whatever crimes have occurred. Witnesses who insist on telling the truth face harassment, intimidation, and accidents that demonstrate the importance of cooperation with official investigations. Appeals processes exist in theory but operate according to principles that make medieval alchemy look like modern chemistry. Appeals require payments that exceed the original fines, legal briefs that must be written in Latin by certified scribes, and court appearances during business hours that conflict with your work schedule. The appeals court judges are typically the same people who made the original decisions, creating a review process that reinforces rather than corrects judicial errors. Legal precedents involving sex worker rights follow the established principle that you have no rights worth recognizing, while clients, officials, and establishment owners enjoy legal protections that would make modern civil liberties lawyers weep with envy. Previous court decisions consistently favor anyone with social status over workers, creating a body of case law that institutionalizes discrimination while maintaining the appearance of legal fairness. Historians still argue whether medieval legal systems were intentionally biased against sex workers or simply reflected broader social attitudes that devalued certain classes of people. But the practical effect was the same: complete legal vulnerability that made workers easy targets for anyone seeking convenient victims for their criminal activities. Contract enforcement operates according to medieval business ethics that favor establishment owners over workers, while treating client agreements as sacred obligations that must be honored regardless of their effects on worker safety or survival. Employment contracts bind workers to the establishment through debt obligations and service requirements, while providing no protections against abuse, dangerous working conditions, or arbitrary changes in terms and compensation. The contract language uses legal terminology that conceals exploitative terms beneath layers of medieval legal jargon that few workers can understand without expensive legal consultation. Hidden clauses include automatic contract extensions, penalty payments for early termination, and liability waivers that hold workers responsible for injuries caused by client violence or establishment negligence. Breach of contract penalties include financial damages that exceed workers' lifetime earning potential, physical punishments that reduce their ability to work, and legal sanctions that eliminate any remaining rights or protections. The contract enforcement system ensures that workers who attempt to leave face consequences that are worse than staying, creating a form of legal bondage that's more effective than traditional slavery. Property rights extend robust protections to establishment owners while treating workers as property rather than people with ownership interests. Tools, clothing, and personal belongings become establishment property through rental agreements and debt collection processes that transfer ownership without compensation. Workers who attempt to leave lose everything they've accumulated during their employment, including personal items that had nothing to do with their work activities. Intellectual property protections prevent workers from using knowledge gained during employment to compete with their former establishments, while trade secret laws criminalize sharing information about working conditions, client identities, or business practices that might help other workers avoid similar exploitation. The legal system protects establishment secrets while providing no corresponding protections for worker privacy or safety. Debt collection procedures operate through court systems that rubber-stamp establishment claims while providing no meaningful opportunity for workers to dispute charges or challenge collection practices. Debt collectors receive legal authority that exceeds their actual expertise, allowing them to seize property, garnish wages, and impose penalties without meaningful judicial oversight. The debt court system processes cases with medieval efficiency, meaning debtors are assumed guilty until proven innocent. Evidence standards favor creditors, and appeal processes are designed to be prohibitively expensive and practically impossible to navigate. Judges who handle debt cases receive compensation from successful collections, creating financial incentives to rule in favor of creditors regardless of case merits. Criminal penalties for workers who violate establishment rules, local ordinances, or arbitrary regulations created by corrupt officials include fines that exceed their earning capacity, imprisonment that prevents them from working while accumulating additional debt, and corporal punishment that reduces their ability to attract customers. The punishment system operates on the principle that workers who cause problems should be made examples of to discourage similar behavior from others. Public punishment ceremonies serve educational purposes by demonstrating the consequences of challenging authority, while providing entertainment for community members who enjoy watching the suffering of people they consider social inferiors. The spectacle reinforces social hierarchies while warning other workers about the dangers of seeking justice or fair treatment. As you navigate this legal wasteland, you begin to understand that law enforcement in medieval society isn't about maintaining order or protecting citizens, it's about preserving power structures that benefit authorities while exploiting everyone else. The legal system operates as a tool for social control that uses the appearance of justice to legitimize oppression, creating institutions that serve the wealthy while treating the poor as resources to be harvested for profit. Your legal education teaches you that rights exist only for people with enough money and social status to purchase them, while everyone else enjoys whatever protections they can afford from authorities whose primary loyalty is to their own financial interests rather than abstract concepts like justice or fairness. Society treats you with the same warm embrace it reserves for lepers, plague victims, and tax collectors, which is to say, you're simultaneously essential for social stability and completely unwelcome in polite company. You discover that medieval civilization has perfected the art of moral compartmentalization, creating elaborate systems that require your services while ensuring you're forever branded as a walking contamination that threatens the spiritual and social purity of everyone around you. The Church leads the charge in this campaign of holy hypocrisy, preaching sermons that condemn your profession while quietly relying on your services to prevent greater social disruption. Parish priests deliver passionate speeches about the evils of fornication and the dangers posed by fallen women, conveniently omitting their own regular visits to establishments like yours. Their Sunday sermons paint you as agents of Satan sent to tempt righteous men into damnation, while their Tuesday evening activities suggest they're remarkably susceptible to satanic influence themselves. Religious doctrine categorizes you somewhere between demons and wild animals, intelligent enough to be held responsible for your sins but not human enough to deserve Christian compassion. The Church teaches that your profession marks you as irredeemably corrupted, a living embodiment of original sin that exists to test the virtue of good Christians. This theological framework provides convenient justification for treating you as expendable while maintaining the fiction that Christian society values all human life. The ecclesiastical hierarchy maintains detailed theological arguments explaining why violence against you doesn't violate religious teachings about loving your neighbor. Church scholars have developed sophisticated reasoning that excludes sex workers from the category of neighbor deserving Christian love, creating loopholes in divine commandments that allow the faithful to abuse you while maintaining their status as moral exemplars. Burial practices reflect your social status with brutal claridia banned from consecrated ground, denied proper funeral rites, and typically dumped in unmarked graves outside city walls alongside criminals, suicides, and victims of plague. The Church refuses to acknowledge your humanity even in death, ensuring that your exclusion from Christian community continues into eternity. Your corpse is considered spiritually contaminated, capable of polluting sacred ground and threatening the salvation of properly buried Christians. Respectable women view you as their greatest enemy, not because of any personal animosity, but because your existence threatens their carefully constructed social positions. Medieval marriage represents an economic transaction where women exchange sexual exclusivity for financial security, and your availability as an alternative outlet for male desires undermines their negotiating power in this marketplace. Their hostility isn't personal, it's a rational response to economic competition that threatens their survival strategies. The wives of your regular customers are often your most dangerous enemies, driven by rage at their husband's infidelity and frustration at their inability to express that anger toward their actual spouses. Medieval law gives women limited options for addressing marital problems, so they direct their fury toward more vulnerable targets who can't fight back effectively. Their attacks range from social ostracism to physical violence, often exceeding their husband's brutality because they're motivated by personal betrayal rather than mere entertainment. Merchant wives organize boycotts against businesses that serve you, pressure landlords to evict you from housing, and lobby authorities to increase penalties for your activities. Their political influence, while limited by medieval gender restrictions, focuses with laser precision on making your life as miserable as possible. They view your destruction as necessary for protecting their marriages and social positions, making them dedicated enemies who pursue long-term campaigns of harassment and persecution. Noble ladies treat you as exotic entertainment, occasionally visiting brothels to observe the lower class's depravity while maintaining their moral superiority through careful social distancing. They're fascinated by your existence but horrified by direct contact, viewing you as a cautionary tale about what happens to women who fail to maintain proper virtue. Their interest is anthropological rather than sympatheticerie, a specimen to be studied rather than a person deserving consideration. Working-class women occupy a complicated middle ground, recognizing that economic desperation could easily force them into your position while needing to maintain social distance to protect their own reputations. They offer minimal sympathy while ensuring everyone knows they're nothing like you, walking a careful line between human compassion and social self-preservation. Their treatment reflects the precarious nature of medieval women's social status, where a single misstep could result in the same social exile you experience daily. Children learn to treat you as bogeymen, threats used by parents to enforce good behavior and moral instruction. Behave yourself or you'll end up like those women becomes a common disciplinary tool that teaches the next generation to view you as cautionary examples rather than human beings deserving basic consideration. This early conditioning ensures that social prejudice against sex workers continues across generations, creating permanent caste distinctions that transcend individual circumstances. The educational system, such as it exists, uses your profession as a standard example of moral failure and social deviance. Religious instruction presents you as evidence of humanity's fallen nature, while moral philosophy classes examine your existence as proof that some people choose evil over good. Academic discussions treat you as abstract concepts rather than real people, analyzing your social function without considering your individual humanity. Artisan guilds ban you from membership and refuse to conduct business with establishments that employ you, creating economic isolation that extends beyond your immediate profession. Blacksmiths won't repair tools used in brothels. Bakers refuse to sell bread to sex workers, and cloth merchants avoid customers associated with your trade. This economic ostracism ensures that your social isolation has practical consequences that affect every aspect of daily survival. The guild system's exclusion operates through formal policies and informal pressure that make it professionally dangerous for members to associate with you. Artisans who violate these social boundaries face expulsion from their guilds, loss of professional credentials, and economic ruin that extends to their families. The social control mechanism ensures compliance through collective enforcement that makes individual compassion too expensive to afford. Professional associations extend similar exclusions to anyone connected with your industry, creating ripple effects that isolate not just sex workers but anyone who provides services to brothels. Physicians who treat you face professional sanctions. Merchants who sell to establishments suffer boycotts, and even clergy who provide spiritual services risk losing their positions. The social contamination spreads through association, making you toxic to anyone seeking respectable careers or social acceptance. Legal disabilities restrict your access to courts, contracts, and civil rights in ways that extend far beyond your professional activities. You can't own property, enter into binding agreements, or participate in legal proceedings as a credible witness. These restrictions apply to all aspects of your life, not just your work, creating permanent second-class citizenship that follows you regardless of any attempts to change careers or circumstances. Travel restrictions limit your movement between towns and regions, requiring special permits and payments that are rarely granted and never guaranteed. The passport system treats you as a potential source of moral contamination that threatens community virtue, requiring local authorities to approve your presence and monitor your activities. Intercity travel becomes nearly impossible, trapping you in whatever location you initially enter the profession. Housing discrimination ensures that you're confined to specific districts and buildings that are typically the most dangerous and unhealthy areas available. Landlords who rent to sex workers face social pressure and economic consequences that make them reluctant to provide decent accommodations, while respectable neighborhoods organize to prevent your residence through legal and illegal means. Your housing options are limited to slums, brothels, and temporary shelters that offer minimal protection from weather, crime, or disease. The residential segregation serves multiple social functions. It contains the perceived moral contamination, makes your services easily accessible to customers who need them, and ensures that respectable citizens can maintain their virtue through geographical separation. The district boundaries are enforced through official policies and unofficial violence that keeps you confined to designated areas while protecting respectable neighborhoods from your corrupting influence. Historians still argue whether medieval society's treatment of sex workers was uniquely harsh or simply reflected broader patterns of social exclusion that affected other marginalized groups. But the evidence suggests that the combination of religious condemnation, economic necessity, and moral hypocrisy created particularly toxic conditions that exceeded even medieval standards for cruelty toward social outcasts. Social mobility becomes impossible not just because of economic barriers, but because of permanent social marking that follows anyone who's ever worked in the sex trade. Former sex workers can never fully escape their past, as community members maintain long memories about moral transgressions and use this information to prevent social advancement. The scarlet letter of sexual commerce becomes a permanent brand that affects not just you but potentially your descendants, creating hereditary social disadvantages that persist across generations. Marriage prospects disappear entirely, as no respectable man would risk his social standing by associating with a former sex worker, while men willing to marry you typically do so for exploitative reasons that continue your victimization in different forms. The few marriages that occur usually involve older men seeking young wives they can control completely, creating domestic relationships that replicate the power dynamics of commercial sexual exploitation. Religious redemption remains theoretically possible according to Christian doctrine, but practically inaccessible due to social barriers that prevent genuine integration into church communities. While theology preaches forgiveness for repentant sinners, congregations actively exclude former sex workers from social activities, religious ceremonies, and community participation. The promise of spiritual salvation becomes meaningless without the social support necessary to maintain reformed behavior. As you experience the full weight of social exile, you begin to understand that medieval society has constructed a perfect trap. They need you to exist but refuse to acknowledge your humanity, require your services but punish you for providing them, and create conditions that force women into sex work while ensuring that anyone who enters the profession can never escape its social consequences. You're caught in a system designed to use and dispose of human beings while maintaining the moral fiction that society bears no responsibility for the conditions it creates and perpetuates.